Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast series in partnership and powered by openbusinesscouncil.org, citiesabc.com, sportsabc.org, and fashionabc.org. So once again, we continue profiling global profiles and personalities that are shifting the world and pushing the boundaries, what it means to do business and in a technology disruptive time, but as well people that have inspiration and authors that actually can make us look at the world in a better way. Especially authors is one of the things that I love. As an author myself, I love to talk with other people that are making ideas real and talking. And actually, when you look at a book, when you look at ideas of an author, you always get inspired and you get out of especially the immediate action of the world with social media and digital. So today I welcome to our series Roger Osorio, author of The Journey to Reinvention, How to Build a Life Aligned with Your Values, Passion, and Purpose. Roger is an international recognized thought leader, executive coach, and reinvention expert who has authored multiple books. And he is as well a BS in finance and international business from the Penn State University and an MBA from Maryville University of St. Louis. And he also owns MS in psychology, leadership development, and coaching from Walden University. So Roger has held various executive level positions in organizations and Fortune 500 companies. And for more than 15 years, he has been sharing his wealth of knowledge among especially young people. And he teaches entrepreneurship and executive master students for the MS degree program at the Sarah Lawrence College at University of Pennsylvania. As a speaker, educator, and facilitator, Roger has delivered over 500 talks and presentations to over 200,000 people around the world, including organizations, corporations, and brands like World Bank, IBM, Google, Louis Vuitton, UNSC, University of Pennsylvania, Inter-American Developing Bank, MasterCard, and the list goes. And one of the things that I'm very interested in you're going to be talking today is the founder as well of the School of Reinvention, a community-based coaching platform that empowers people to launch and succeed in personal and career in reinvention. As an author, as I mentioned, he wrote The Journey to Reinvention, which you're going to be talking today, where he shares this personal journey of self-discovery and offers inspiring stories, powerful exercises, and practical tips for readers. And as well, he has served as USSF licensed soccer coach at St. Louis Scott Gallagher Soccer Club and Center for Survivors of Torture and War Trauma. He also held the board membership of the International Soccer Academy. And I think to finish, of course, we could go for a lot of things. He's also the marketing committee member at the Chesterfield Chamber of Commerce, supporting a variety of projects, including focus group studies, rebranding initiatives, websites, digital presence, and so forth. Welcome to our series, Roger.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Dennis. Really appreciate this opportunity. And yeah, getting to know you a little bit better through your website and through your work. I definitely look forward to talking to you a little bit about reinvention. And of course, your work, you're focused on that fourth industrial revolution. And so a lot of reinvention needs to happen on many levels in order for that to become a reality.
Completely is more important than ever, I think, especially right now with everything happening in tech and AI. So let's start by your basis. So you have a fantastic education profile and as well a fantastic career, both in education, all kinds of education, from academia to sports to professional business, and as well to children, and as well even to survivors of war and so forth. So tell us about how did you build this amazing and actually multidisciplinary career?
Yeah, I think it all started for me when I had a shift in what my definition of success was. When I graduated from university with my bachelor's degrees when I was much younger, I had this definition that of success that, equaled moving up in a corporation and moving up to, the highest levels that I could in any business. And I had even specific targets. At the time, it was General Electric. I was a big fan of Jack Welch's work. And I was also a fan of Ingersoll Rand, another company, a very big company at the time. They're a little smaller now these days. And so I thought I want to move up in these organizations, and that's what for me was a great definition of success was. And I was into it. It served me incredibly well for many years right out of university. But it was about 3, 4 years into my first corporate job where I started realizing that maybe there was another definition of success. And it started with a part-time job I had. I had a part-time job teaching math at a learning center, just a few hours a day, no more than 10 to 15 hours a week. And it was always after hours, after the office hours. And I'd go in there, and the work I did with these students felt so much more fulfilling and impactful. And there was something in me that I just found, wow, this is something I'm interested in. I think I could be even better in. And all of a sudden, my original definition of success was challenged, because this was going to take me away from that corporate path. And once I finally made the decision in 2008 to take that leap and go from corporate to reinventing myself into a math teacher, really anything became possible. And all of a sudden, all those things you read in my past became possible. You run into these opportunities as you're getting involved in different activities, connecting with different people, making the most of different opportunities. And all of a sudden you find yourself being able to impact a lot of different audiences. So for me, that move put me on a path to becoming a math teacher. And, speaking of my master's in psychology and my MBA, one of the things that I realized early in that journey to becoming a math teacher was that while I had a lot of success initially at the beginning, working at the Learning Center, helping students break through confidence and issues and limiting beliefs about themselves in math, I also acknowledge that I don't think I can presume that I would be amazing at this full time. I think I've got some beginner's luck here. And so my first thought was, what skills do I really need to learn in order to be prolific at this, in order to be lethally good, like professionally, where at any moment I can be called upon and I can deliver results. And that inspired me to go find a program that could teach me those skills. And that's how I found a master's in psychology, which was focused on executive coaching. Turns out that coaching, one of the most powerful ways to teach students, versus instead of using, let's say, traditional teaching methods, especially when you're working with students outside of the classroom, when you're in those separate interventions. Coaching is an incredible way to unleash their confidence, to help them break through their limiting beliefs, just like we do with executives and with professionals. The same thing for math students. And all of a sudden, your job is to stand out of their way and let them just be awesome at this subject. And so right there, going through all of that, it showed me that really anything is possible. I can become a math teacher. I can become an executive coach. I can become an international speaker. I can work with all of these clients. And so that shift in my mindset, that shift in my definition of success really set me on a path that has made it an incredible journey, and it continues to be a great journey.
Impressive, and congratulations for that journey. And I want to touch one thing you mentioned, that is the way you start defining the definition of success. Okay, this is actually let's look at dive into your coaching, but as well into your career. So I think there's a lot of people around me and my team, a lot of I'm sure people listening to us, and that is something that it was very important for me. There was a time in my life that and in my case, I was a writer all my life since I was a child. And one of the things I realized is that normally is a bit the old adage, what you think you normally end up actually becoming. But normally the language we use for ourselves, the language we use for our careers, it's very difficult. So, and I think as a coach and as someone that has a fantastic career and as well as an educator, how would you describe and actually incentivize people listen to us? Because I think it's one of the biggest challenges right now we're facing is precisely how we can actually transform ourselves, especially in a time that everything is instantaneous. Instantaneous social media, instantaneous news, and actually people get overwhelmed and then they don't stop, they don't think, they don't look at reinventing themselves. So let's talk about this if you wouldn't mind, because I think this is key for your work and before you go to your book and to your other part of achievements.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most effective and empowering activity that anybody can engage in order to start paving this path and paving the way to potential future reinventions is to start by engaging in projects and experiments. I know you do a lot of work with startups, and so this mindset of build, measure, learn, and how the more we can build, measure, and learn, the more quickly we can iterate through our interests, our ideas, our potential passions, and all of that. And so what I always work with my clients to do is to find a project to engage in, find an experiment to run, but not one that can go endlessly, not one that requires a year. I'm talking a project that you can complete in a month, something that you can engage in quickly to learn something about yourself. Because when you're making these decisions, we see, and I'm not sure what it's like in the UK right now and in your part of the world, but in the US, the great resignation is a very real thing, right? We're seeing record numbers of people quitting their jobs, just quitting because they feel like this is not right for me and all of that. We're also seeing a wave of quiet quitting. I mean, people who are actively disengaged with their employers, but not quitting. So they're just right there, but they want to quit, but they're not quitting. And when I think about all of those groups, these are people who are in search of getting to know themselves better so they can create the next opportunity. And so one of the problems, though, is that when they don't do this activity, if you quit, you tend to focus on running away from something rather than running towards something. If you quiet quit, you're just avoiding it altogether by staying in there and kind of fighting it. So launching projects, engaging in small experiments is what really helps you do that. For me, for instance, I'll give you my example when it came to teaching math. People are always surprised like how my journey to teaching math began, but it began with one Craigslist ad. Now, Craigslist, I don't know if it's over there in Europe, but it's a platform where you can just post any advertisement, any classified, what used to be in the back of the newspapers in the tiny little letters, like, things you're selling, jobs you're offering. We have a website that has that in a very simple way. Today, there's so many more platforms to offer your freelancing service and all of that. But I posted an ad on Craigslist that offered my tutoring services. I secured one client and then I shut down the ad. And I worked with that one client. I honestly couldn't even cover, I had never taken his math course. This guy, Patricio, reaches out to me and he says, I need your help. And I said, okay, great. And I said, of course, yes, before I even asked him, what class are you in? And he told me game theory. And I'm like, oh, I've never taken game theory. I've taken some advanced math, but I've never taken game theory. But of course, like I was so excited to do this experiment. I didn't want to say no to this first opportunity. So I said, oh yeah, absolutely. I can help you out. Send me the syllabus that you work with. What's the textbook you use? And I went and I found an old used copy of like an older edition of his textbook for like $30 on Amazon. I purchased that. And my mission was to follow his syllabus and always stay 1 to 2 weeks ahead of him so that whenever he had questions, I could always at least answer what he was working on. And that experiment didn't work out the way I thought it would. I charged $35 an hour, but it took me 3 hours to prepare for that 1 hour. So, it was from a business model perspective, this was not going to really work out, not in this way. So the experiment ended. It took me I think I tutored him for about 2 to 3 months until his semester was over. And I think it was really just about 2 months and then his semester ended. We got to mission accomplished. We were able to get him through that course, which was his mission. And I was happy that I was able to be able to help him get to a result. But then I said, okay, that was a nice experiment. And I put that aside for many months. And it was only like later that year that I started thinking about, I wonder if I could do some part-time work to make a little extra money to help pay for my student loans. And I started thinking about where I could offer help, where my skills could be most helpful. And then I remembered that experiment and I realized, you know what, that work with Patricio was fun. If I have my pick, I would help people with classes that I've taken already rather than classes I haven't. And so I went and found this learning center that was offering a role teaching high school math mostly. And I thought that I can handle. And that would be fun to do after work. I wouldn't have to prep for that. I could definitely work with students on the fly, just in the moment and on demand when it came to those topics. And that one little project or that one little experiment on Craigslist set me on a path to becoming a math teacher. Many more steps happened. And by the way, it took 5 years from the moment that I put that ad on Craigslist before I ended up in the classroom teaching high school math. I did a lot of math along the way and I enjoyed a lot of it. And most importantly, I got to know myself really well so that by the time I made a pivot and went into the math classroom, I knew that that was the place for me. I had practiced enough. I had built my skills. I had confidence in this new area. I was ready to go. I was like, this is something I can do. And so what I would offer to anybody who is perhaps not feeling completely engaged with the work they do today, or they don't feel that this is where they can be at their best, that's okay. No need to quit right away. No need to run away from anything. Engage in a project. A project will help you find fulfillment outside of your day job and bring a better version of yourself to your day job while you build yourself up and get to know yourself better. And when you're ready, when the time is right, you'll know it. Like most things in life, you'll know that moment. It's time to pivot.
Fantastic, and it's one inspiring journey that is important but very difficult. So one of your narratives is about the 9-to-5ers launch of a side hustle, which you just mentioned how you did yours. So this is a key element, and I think a lot of the the work or the conventional jobs we are right now being reinvented. And I think it's going to be faster than ever in history, because what everything we have in terms of technology, fourth industrial revolution, AI in particular, are right now creating new jobs, destroying others. And I think ChatGPT and Bard are going to probably, yeah, I think probably ChatGPT is actually putting Google out of business, or Google has to upgrade the game. But this is going to really create a lot of disruption. And one of the challenge is, like you said, is in your case, all your journey was done in a sense of self-discovering, and as well the way you understand your needs, your passion, and how you put that in conventional work, then grew and became a career. But most of the people, they need to have their paycheck, and most of the people are in a paycheck that normally highly is not even high enough to pay the bills of a month. So that's a challenge right now, in the paradox. In one hand, yes, there's a lot of potential business, and if you look at just some numbers, the gig economy is around 1 trillion plus business. The creative economy is around $300 billion, but only the 1% in all the internet really makes some business, and probably the 0.1 really can have a live like lifestyle that you have, and even me. And this kind of lives are not easy. You have to be very strong. So what would be the kind of things that, especially for people that look for advice from yours, and your career speaks for itself, but as well this part of coaching, and your book, The Journey to Reinvention, touched about this. So it's a lot of things, but if you could summarize a bit here, some of the top level that you've been discovering and working.
Yeah, absolutely. This idea of living paycheck to paycheck is what you were describing earlier, and what you were saying. This is super important. The decision to quit is something that I do not take lightly. It took me about 8 months to finally make the decision and do it, or I should say, to actually do it. And it was an 8-month process of really thinking about, how would I execute this? How would I ensure my financial stability for so many months, create a runway, if you will, financial runway, so that I would know that I could be okay, even if I didn't make another penny, knowing that I would do something to make another penny. I would not sit around doing nothing. But I wanted to pretend as if the worst case scenario happened. And that's how I approached it. It's interesting. At the time when I made that, when I quit my first corporate job, I had about $150,000 in student loan debt. So I had a lot that I owed. And it was a very scary thing to figure out, like, okay, what do I do with this? Like, what do I do with all this debt? And is reinvention even possible for me, given how much I owe? And I found ways. There were ways to restructure some of those loans. And did they have consequences? Absolutely. I paid more interest probably than I would have if I had paid them off more quickly. However, I saw that additional interest as the price to the cost of reinvention. I go, if I really want to do this. And so one of the things that is really important, that you don't take that decision lightly. And that's why the project is so important, because the project helps you get to know yourself better and really think through what is right for you at what point in time. You can do a lot. In the book, I talk about stories like, Sarah Blakely starting Spanx, and it's an apparel company based in the United States. She actually, I think, became the first woman self-made billionaire in the world, and with her business, when she sold it. And when you hear the beginning of her story, which is the part that interests me the most, she built that company for 2 years while working her day job, because she needed that income, and she used some of that income, in fact, to invest in the business and to help build that. But she needed that income, and so she kept that job. And she recommends now to many people that don't quit your job. Build on the side, validate, verify what you believe is true, and verify that your products are working, validate that they're working in the market before you make such a move. And so the number one piece of advice that comes from the book is that quitting is not something that you should ever take lightly. That said, it's not something that you should ever take off the table. It may not be right today, but there are ways to build yourself up and get ready for that moment. Like I said, in my case, from the moment when I really started thinking about, this is not the path for me, it took 8 months before I made the final move and actually left the company. But I had to have a plan in place, and thank goodness I had a plan, because 3 weeks after I quit after my last day, the 2008 crash began. And the only thing that really came out of it that was complete luck, I take no credit for this, was that part of my plan was to cash in my 401k, which is the American version of our pension system. And I cashed in whatever I had in there, and I took it all out so that I can have that as an emergency fund, and I could live off some of that. And fortunately it had done well up until that moment. And little did I know that that was one of the best moves I could have made. Again, not knowing, that was pure luck, but it worked out incredibly well, because then everyone lost their portfolios and all that. But that moment happened, and while it was scary and I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done to myself, what have I done in my career, layoffs are just starting to become very common now, and all of this, how will I ever get a job again if things don't work out? At least I had my backup plan. And so all of this came from months, many months, almost a year. I mean, 8 months is almost a year of planning to get to that point. So key idea from the book: do not take quitting lightly. That said, quitting is never off the table. Always keep it on the table. It may be the right thing for you, but at the right time.
Now that's inspiring. That it's really a key element, although it's not easy. Let's put it that way.
No,
Um,
absolutely not.
so let's touch on your book, and of course, I would go probably straight away to the book, and then we go to your career, because these areas are related with the book.
Mhm.
So when you look at what you've been doing in terms of your career, and especially on the book, there's a lot of things, and the book is precisely about how you can actually follow all the things that you just mentioned. So the journey to reinvention, how to build a life aligned with your values, passion, and purpose. So it's a great book that I suggest everyone to read, and as well, it's a book that is more important than ever, let's put it that way, because I think you need to reinvent yourself continuously, not once, multiple times, because even people like you and me, like you said, at the time was game theory, probably is more important than ever. And all these kind of things are really key, and especially we have to reinvent ourselves right now, how to even use ChatGPT, because it's not easy. And now Bard,
Yeah.
and of course no one knows which one of these will survive, because ChatGPT is only 3 months old, but it's already
Yeah.
disrupting a lot of things, even the way you can write a book. So tell us about the journey to reinvention, your last book.
Yeah, I think starting from the highest level of what the book is about, it's about honestly, if I could rename the title, and maybe in a second edition I would call it The Courage to Reinvent Yourself, or The Courage to Reinvent, because, that is really what it's about. Now, you hit on something really important. You mentioned that we need to constantly reinvent ourselves. And that's another key theme of the book. And that's why I got the title, The Journey to Reinvention, because it's a journey that we're on consistently all of the time. So the idea here is that, every 3 to 5 years, our values, passions, and purpose will most likely go through some sort of shift. They rarely stay static. What I enjoyed as a 20-year-old, I didn't enjoy as a 30-year-old. I enjoyed other things as a 30-year-old. And now in my 40s, I enjoy other things in my 40s. And so, we're constantly evolving and changing. Even our values, which sometimes seem like the ones that are probably going to stay the most firm, even values shift. I just had my first child. She's 4 months old. Oh my gosh. 3 months before she was born, I started writing notes about, and I was inspired that my third book is going to be about parenthood. And why? Because it ties into my work on reinvention. I experienced the single greatest shift in values that I had ever experienced. And I did not see it coming. It was not something I said, oh, I'd like to change my values now that I have a child coming. No, it just hit me one day. And it was just a few months before she was born. And as the months continued and we got closer to her birth, and then her birth came, wow, the shift was super clear. And I realized my values have just changed. So, our values, our purpose, and our passions do change over time for a variety of reasons. And as such, we need to keep up with that. And reinvention is how we keep up with that. If everything in our lives, the like our jobs, our habits, our routines, maybe even where we live, the friends we keep, and all of those things, if all of that stays consistent and never changes, you are going to create a wider and wider gap between where you are and what your life is actually about. And that the greater that gap gets, the more difficult it is to fight that tension. There will be a lot of tension in your life because you are not in alignment with it. Now, does it mean that we can keep our lives in perfect alignment all of the time? Absolutely not. I see it more as like a graph that moves kind of like, it gets a little away and then it catches up, and it gets a little away and it catches up, and your life keeps up and kind of catches up. But reinvention is how we do it. We might decide that there needs to be a major shift in our relationships, or maybe a major shift in how we address our health or our wealth, or maybe it's something in our spirituality, maybe it's our careers. And of course, careers is where we spend a lot of our time. So that tends to be a big one and a scary one, because it's often tied to our income that we need, as you mentioned earlier, to live and pay our bills. And sometimes it's not even enough. And so this idea that reinvention is constant and never ending, I completely agree with you. And that's one of the biggest themes of the book. But the other one, as I mentioned earlier, the courage to reinvent. And that is so important, is the belief that you can do this. And one of the things that I found working with clients, coaching people, working with aspiring entrepreneurs who wanted to make that switch from corporate to entrepreneurship, one of the things that I learned from working with them was that it is scary. And many times they just believe it's not for me. I'm not wired for this. I'm not built for this. I don't have the income to do this. I don't have the luxury to do this. I don't have the time to do this. Here's another one. I've invested so much on this path. How dare I leave all that behind and start a new path now? Oh, the limiting beliefs are, I mean, countless. It could go on and on. I'm on an international visa. I can't take such a risk at this moment. There are so many reasons that people have not to do it, because it is scary. As you mentioned, it's difficult work. What we've done in our careers, it is not easy work. That said, we also know it's incredibly rewarding, that we are living in alignment with matters to us. We wake up every morning, we enjoy what we do. And that right there makes all of that hard work totally worth it. And so that's the second key theme, is building that courage. And in the book, I worked really hard through a lot of stories, and not just mine. One of the other big stories I really share is Leonardo da Vinci's story. We give Leonardo da Vinci, I think, a little too much credit for being a genius. He wasn't a genius. He was someone who did the work. He was someone who explored his curiosities whenever he had them. He truly lived a reinventor's life. As his values changed, as his passions changed, as his purpose changed, so did his work. He would say, you know what, I'm going to work on something else now. So much so that we give him credit for not finishing other work and having so much incomplete work. That's how quickly that guy reinvented himself. He didn't wait. He just knew, I'm no longer interested in this, so I'm going for that. And he, for me, is one of the best ones to look at, because we think he had it easy. He didn't. He went through incredibly tough moments. It wasn't perfectly aligned. He was not as fast as we all thought at reinventing himself. There were moments, and we see it in his notebooks, where he was actually like totally depressed. He would even say in one of his notebook entries, I am living every day to die. That is like the version of, and I won't use the word, but FML, F my life. Like that is the 1500s version of saying that. And he said that in his notebook. And I'm reading that. I go, this is powerful. The fact that he's writing this statement over and over and over again. He was going through a tough time. So he went through the same things that we go through, and had to decide and make big decisions about how to reinvent himself and in which direction to reinvent himself. And so this courage to reinvent, it's something that we all have to, work towards. We have to build over time. And it starts with our beliefs, and it starts with the things that we say to ourselves, the assumptions we make about what it takes to actually move. And so that's why in my work, and my second book, which I started work on, is going to be more focused on the project, like the power of a project and what a project does to begin this process. Da Vinci, many projects. That guy had so many projects going on at any one time, because he just lived life on his terms. Fortunately for him, he planted seeds in his youth that when he got to that 29-year-old point, when he was really depressed and tired of living in Florence, and he's like, FML, I want to get out of here. I don't like this life that I have. I want to do something else. He had fortunately planted seeds that helped him launch the next reinvention. By the way, just for those who don't know too much about Leonardo da Vinci's career, at the time he was living a painter's life. He was an artist and all of that. But to reinvent himself so that he could move from Florence to Milan and relaunch his life, he had to take a job as a military engineer. And you're like thinking, wait, was this guy working on military technology before that? Absolutely not. But he knew enough about engineering from a part-time project that he used to do. He was into the theater and into the arts. And so he helped build most of the special effects equipment for stage performances. So all of those complex pulleys and systems and all of that, he was a master at building that. And the guy was able to take that skill and apply it to becoming a military engineer. So the two themes right there, you know, that's the second one that I wanted to mention, is the courage to reinvent. And like I said, the first one, reinvention, is constant and never ending. And that's why I call it a journey.
Wonderful. I am a huge fan of Leonardo da Vinci, so I read probably like 10 biographies of him. But one of the things that let's use Leonardo da Vinci before we go to the other part. So I think really, as a fan of Leonardo da Vinci, I think you touch really a lot of important things that I think for people listening to us are really critical. In history, they were always critical, and we have to see that during, of course, the Renaissance, you could die actually from any disease, and the average lifetime was 20 years old. 22. You have to see Lorenzo, for instance, Lorenzo de Medicis, which became in history as one of the most powerful financial innovators in history, and as well as a mecenas and actually a writer as well. He actually died when he was less than 30. So we have to see all these challenges. So Leonardo da Vinci, of course, he was a force of nature and he effectively changed the world. He only did 15 paintings, and each of his paintings is worth around 100 to $500 million each. So even the last one that was found, that was, no one knows that it's completely from him, but 90% of people think so. It was sold for close to $500 million. So
Yeah.
let's look at what you just said. So this capacity of reinvention and the capacity to understand yourself, independent of all the challenges. And I think one thing as well that you just said is somehow, I think there's different words how to say that, but is in the end of the day, you have to, there's the word reinvention, and there's the word kind of dismantling. So you have to dismantling the myth. You have to dismantling the layers of, for instance, that's the quote that I love from Noah Harari, that is that every culture is an operating system. And all of us, if you are in Latin America, if you are in North America, if you are in Canada, if you are in Europe, if you are in France or UK, is completely different from you if you are in Spain or Portugal or Italy. There's nuances that really can actually somehow make your life immediately. And of course, we're lucky because both you and me are in the Western world. But if you go to Asia or Africa, you have a lot of other stigmas to go through. But well, let's look at this part of dismantling the myth, which you just did with Leonardo da Vinci. I think this is really a key element for people that want to succeed. And I think there's a lot of studies about what makes you successful or not. And there's of course, there's the capacity to reinvent that you mentioned. There's the capacity of persistence or resilience. But I would like to work on this concept of, and I think it's a great title for a book, dismantling the myths, especially around big personalities like Leonardo da Vinci, which we cannot have something more powerful than that. So if you want to touch a bit this, especially as a coach, which is one area that you do for a lot of big corporations as well.
Yeah, you know, I think that with Da Vinci, the key was that he followed his curiosities. And this actually goes back to his childhood. He was not raised like a regular child because he was born out of wedlock. So his father had him grow up in the countryside, away from the city, away from all of the friends and all of the people that respect him. And so his father didn't want anybody really to know about Da Vinci. So Da Vinci grew up with his uncle and also a little bit with his grandfather as well. And his uncle was like the black sheep of the family. This is like the person who didn't want to become the notary like every other Da Vinci. Like they were supposed to be. They come from a long line of notaries, and this guy was like, "Oh, I don't like detail. I don't like this stuff. I don't want to do this. I want to live life on my terms." And that guy just, of course, ended up with a little bit of money where at least he had a piece of land and he could live somewhere and not have to worry about paying rent. And he was able to just, you know, find odd jobs and do odd things to make money. Well, imagine this person raising a child and waking up every day, and the child says, "What do you want to do?" And then this guy says, "What do you want to do?" And he's like, let's go explore. Awesome, let's explore. And imagine for a moment a young Da Vinci, like any young kid today, seeing a bug on the floor for the first time, or like a weird species of a plant and all of that, and asking, "What's that, uncle? What is that?" "I don't know. Let's find out." Like a coach would. A coach would never tell you the answer. They would always ask you questions or say, empower you to go find the answer. And this is how Da Vinci grew up. A lot of times when people give him so much credit for his ability to draw so well and so accurately, came from his childhood when he wanted to study bugs and he wanted to study animals, and he had to cut them open in order to actually study them. The problem was that he had a race against the clock of animals decomposing on him. And if they decompose, he can't study them. So he had to learn. And of course, he did not have the benefit of an iPhone to take a quick picture of it and then just zoom in later and study it. So he's like, I got to draw this thing, and I got to draw it really fast and really accurate. And so through that practice, this guy builds that skill. The point I'm trying to make here is that Da Vinci was encouraged at a very young age to simply follow every curiosity. And he had the ultimate coach, his uncle, who simply said, let's figure it out together. I don't know. What do you think, young Leonardo? And then he would say, well, I think this. Well, let's go find out. And he was coached rather than taught. And that just allowed him to develop his curiosity at a level that could never really be taken away from him. And we see that throughout his life. All he did was follow his curiosities. If something intrigued him, fluid dynamics, hey, let's go study fluid dynamics for a little while. That sounds like fun. Or let's explore cooking. That sounds like fun. Or let's explore, I don't know, horticulture. That sounds like fun. He just explored whatever was interested in it. And I think that's what we can take away from him. And it's exploring curiosity. Like, how do we develop or reignite our curiosity? Unfortunately, school takes that curiosity away. Even back then, it took curiosity away. When Da Vinci's father finally realized, okay, this kid's getting older, he's a teenager, he obviously looks like me, people are starting to talk, I need to come clean with this and I need to bring him out. Otherwise, he's going to be this secret that everyone talks about me behind my back. So he brought him to a school in Florence and enrolled him in a high school, or more or less was probably the equivalent of a high school. And he got kicked out pretty quickly. Why? Because, of course, Da Vinci would ask his teachers, why? How is that? Can you explain that more? And look, just stop asking questions. It is what it is. Just write it down and stop asking questions. Finally, the father was like, dude, you got kicked out of school. Like, what am I going to do with you? And then he went to one of his clients and said, hey, can you take a look at this drawing? Tell me what you think. You know, you're an artist. Why don't you tell me what you think? And then boom, Leonardo got on his path to becoming an artist. Curiosity was the key. And we can learn this from him. How do we reignite that? We've gone through, almost many of us, especially in Western countries, have gone through a very similar type of education. How do we reactivate some of that curiosity that was taken away? And I think that's the key. And there's a lot of great research that I've been looking into for my second book on the psychology of curiosity. Like, I want to understand that. And I'm still a student of this, so I can't talk much about this because I'm still learning. But I am identifying the psychologists that focus most of their research on the psychology and neuroscience of curiosity, because I want to know, how can I help people actually put this into practice, understand themselves and their own curiosity better so that they can reactivate it and begin following that in order to figure out what their next project is going to be.
Amazing. And I think this is special. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. I think for everyone listening to us, is really a lot of wonderful things. And I think really the curiosity is the most important thing. Let's put it that way. Because if you don't have curiosity, there's nothing you can do. You have to really want, and this is actually cultural as well, because some cultures kill the curiosity. For instance, if you are in Japan, you have to be much more about respect. And this really is a big thing, because it will stigmatize you for a lot of things, for good and for bad. So let's look at now a bit some of your work. And I think, well, if you want to highlight some of the things, because we have a lot of stuff to talk. So let's look at some of the highlights of your career for people listening to us, because you have from coaching IBM to coaching big banks and big organizations, but as well, one of the things you've been doing is as well doing a lot of work with social impact and so forth. So I don't know, one or two things that you want to highlight, because I think it's really important for us going through the concept to the theory and or the theory to the practice, let's put it that way. I think it's interesting to see how you actually reinvent yourself, some of the things that you're highlighting that you think are really key from your expertise, from the things as well that you did, some mistakes that you did yourself. You mentioned how you reinvent yourself during initially of your career. Now looking at your experience and some of the benchmarks that you would like to share with us.
Yeah. So, actually, I'm going to boil it down to one thing that has probably made the biggest impact on many reinventions. It was almost like the underlying part of so many reinventions. And it was my work with an organization called Startup Weekend. Startup Weekend is a 3-day boot camp that teaches people how to bring business ideas from concept to creation. And I became a global facilitator for this event and traveled all around the world. I've facilitated over 80 of these events, helping over 4,000 people around the world learn this skill so that they can launch their business ideas, or at the very least test their business ideas. And that work for me did a lot in many other ways, besides adding this value to the world. One, it was an opportunity to practice my speaking skills. Every weekend, I had to speak a lot. I was running a 3-day event, so I had many opportunities to speak. Two, I was teaching concepts and ideas around how to actually do this. And three, I was coaching and guiding teams going through the process, because most of the weekend was spent them actually working on bringing a real idea to life. And so having this opportunity to regularly practice in a high like pressure, in a real situation where you have real people depending on you, was one of the most incredible things that allowed me to not only develop my skills but also showcase my skills. My first speaking engagement at the World Bank came because someone was in attendance at one of those events that I did in Washington, D.C. And he worked at the bank and he was hosting an event, and it was a major event that they expected over 90 or people, delegates from over 90 countries to attend. And he said, I want your energy. What I just saw at this event, I want that energy at the World Bank. I want that passion, that fire, and your knowledge around all this stuff. And so we have a theme that I think aligns with you, and we want to bring you in. My job at IBM came from a startup weekend event. Someone saw me practicing and flexing my skill in coaching, speaking, and teaching. And it was a senior executive who was reporting to the CEO at the time. And he said, I'm going to create a role just for you. If you're open to this and you're ready to leave teaching, I want to bring you to IBM, and I'm going to create a role for you. And we're going to create special projects for you to work on. I thought, wow, this is amazing. So many speaking engagements. My teaching job at the University of Pennsylvania, I never thought I would get a teaching job at an Ivy League institution, but they happened to be in attendance at one of my events. They saw what I was doing and they said, we love your blend of academic and practical. You're not too academic, which we have a lot of that. We need that blend of academic and practical and all that energy you bring to teaching. And so I had the opportunity to go teach, and I'm still part of the University of Pennsylvania faculty. All of these things came from a startup weekend event. And the key here is, for everyone listening, is that find that thing that you can practice regularly. It doesn't have to become your full-time job. It doesn't have to become your become your primary source of income. By the way, Startup Weekend is a voluntary engagement. It only pays for my travel. It doesn't pay for my time on those weekends, but it has paid back many times over because of all of the work that I've gotten from those events. And also the skill that I developed allowed me to do even better work and command higher fees over time. And so the key is, I want to leave you with this idea: find that thing that you could do regularly. The things you do for a long period of time. For some people, it's blogging. They've been blogging forever. Dinis, for you, it's these interview series. Ever since the pandemic, I think you're up to 200 or 300 of these interviews. These things that we do prolifically for a very long time help us sharpen skills at a level that very few people have reached. And because of that, you separate yourself right away. Also, when you practice these things publicly, such as the type of work I'm doing, or Dinis, the work that you do, obviously your videos are everywhere and all of that, this is an opportunity for clients of Dinis and clients of mine, or future clients of ours, to find us and say, wow, I love what you do. I love how you do it. I love your presence and all of that. And wow, your skills are amazing. Yeah, we've been practicing this for a long time. It's not an accident. I wasn't this good when I was doing my first 10 to 20 startup weekends, but after 20 startup weekends, I really started to take off. Once I broke 50, I mean, it was like anytime I go to a startup weekend, I create a business opportunity for myself. And so this is what I want to leave you with. Find that thing that you can do regularly that helps you not only build a skill and develop it, but also showcase it publicly. If you do that and commit to that all the time, and don't worry about whether it makes money or not, just make sure you're doing it consistently, I promise you the returns you're going to get are going to be incredible.
Thank you, Roger. I know that you have to go, but it's really inspiring. I think our audience has a lot to learn. Please go to we're going to put all the links to Roger, a different property, but rogerosorio.com, and we'll put this. It's been an honor. I think there's a lot of more questions I have. Probably we'll do a take two, but thank you so much for being part of this series.
I appreciate the invitation to do this, and I thank you and your audience for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.